Well, we have a good introduction, technology and power. This is why at Laboratoire de l'Égalité, the first thing we are asking for is that in every instance, thinking about AI regulation, we are asking for parity. And you said you don't need to be a technical person to think about AI. And usually those people tell us, yes, but there are not enough women. We have one. I'm sure that in your network, there are many others. So if you see instances like this and they tell you there are no women, okay, come to us, come to Ivana, and we will find women to think about it. Thank you. So I ask the panel to come and join. So we're going to begin with you, Jean-Laurent Costeux. So we are in the panel a representation of non-mixity in our world. So you are the technical guy, we can say it this way. You are the head of operations on big data projects at Orange. Which means that you have a department accountable for the end-to-end delivery of AI services for customers based on machine learning and big data product development, so a lot of technical words. But on the other hand, you feel also very concerned by corporate social responsibility. So I guess that this is why you are leading Mix IT Network, which promotes women in technical teams, which also fights against gender stereotypes and try to get also men involved in defending gender equality. You are also father of 3 daughters, which might explain part of your interest on the subject. So to begin, for one part. So as a hands-on IT and big data director, you are managing teams who really conceive from A to Z the AI plans and programs. So as an introduction, to further understanding also of what it is, could you explain us what at this A to Z consumption and production process, and at which stages are the dangers of enhancing gender bias, or, because we want to be positive also, and you said it also in the introduction, the opportunity to correct them?
Okay. First,
maybe you need a microphone.
So first, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be here. And thank you, Ivana, for the introduction. So, you know, and you said it in your talk, AI is based on algorithms, and algorithms are based on data. And if the data is not up to date or is of poor quality, then the algorithm will be biased or not up to date. That's simple, but if we don't recognize that the data is biased, or if we do not sensitize people to ethical questions, like you said, there will be no miracle. So what we can do, and I will say as a technical part, first is maybe to enrich data, to remove the biases from the data. So enrich data, we can enrich data in different ways, and that's one way. It can be some ways where the data can be also perverted. But by doing more research on women, by doing more, adding more data on women, we can enrich this data. We can also push regular audits, gender audits, to check the quality of the databases. And we can also force the algorithm to ignore identified biases. For instance, we can decide when we know that the data is biased, or when we know that we have not enough data on women, we can choose to say the algorithm try to adapt, try to re-equilibrate the balance between men and women. And this can be obvious, but I would say also something maybe more historical. You know, if we come back 5 years ago, gender feature, because every classification, every algorithm is based on feature, the gender feature was one of the most used feature in the data. So this means it's like if we say difference between black and white, which could not be imagined today. So this means that we had a gender field in the data. We had that 5 years ago, and we still have, for some advertising campaigns, some predefined fields where we add a gender feature in the data. So maybe we can start by removing these fields from the data, by removing a predefined feature that we know that are not necessary today, because algorithms are intelligent enough to produce automatic data-driven segmentation, that we don't have to add predefined feature on the gender, and the algorithms are sufficiently intelligent to reproduce the stereotypes of the society. We don't need to artificially add the stereotypes in the data. So this can be the first step. Afterwards, but maybe my colleagues will talk more about that, and I totally agree with you. We have to create ethical committees. We have to create. We have to talk about it to recruit women, to add diversity to our teams, to be sure that we cannot be sure, but to progress on the diversity of the teams, to progress on the quality of the data that we use to train the algorithms. I will stop that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So a technical part. So we're going to see with you, Isa, the consumer-centric viewpoint. So you are originally from Australia. You have lived in Japan, in Arizona, in New York City. So you have a world overview. You started your tech industry journey at Google during 7 years. And then you joined Pandora Radio as they launched and expanded their presence in Australia and New Zealand. And you are now the global head of diversity and belonging at Spotify. So everyone knows what Spotify is? Yes, okay. Actually,
that's a good start for what I'm doing.
I have to admit, I didn't know. So this is why I asked.
That's good.
But now I know. We would like really to share your experience from a consumer-centric viewpoint. How is artificial intelligence used by Spotify? And again, what are the key spots really to monitor where AI could represent a danger and where we can use it to correct?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the introduction. I'm going to appeal to all the Spotify listeners in the room for a moment. And if you pull up your home screen, you probably see an interface that has a carousel of different playlists. Maybe Discover Weekly, maybe it's Top Hits Today, something along those lines. All of that information that you're shown on that homepage carousel is pulled from data that we have on your listening habits, how you have identified in terms of gender on the platform. And we do recognise that gender is non-binary for the purposes of our collection of data. So we have an option for people to identify as non-binary or other gender. So I just want to make that point as well. And within that carousel, we serve you music, typically new music through the Discover Weekly, that we think is what you want to listen to and what you want to discover, or based on your listening history, it's going to serve you up more music that's more aligned with what we think your profile is. So that's a little bit about how we're feeding in to Spotify. Now, some of the dangers that we come up with is that we only have a certain amount of data, and we're making a lot of assumptions on that data as well. Assumptions that are from how we think women and men or non-binary genders listen to different music, what their interests might be, and how they may discover new music. We also look at what your listening habits are and whether different cultures impact that ability to discover new music as well. So to overcome that, the no-brainer in my mind is that we need representation from different backgrounds to really uncover what it is that's at play when we are serving up this content for our listeners. Now, the tricky part is not so much around music anymore, it's around podcasts. And if anyone is sort of tuned into Spotify recently, we've taken on a huge bet of becoming an audio platform, not just a music platform. And within podcasts, we have a really interesting space as it comes to bias, because we're essentially listening to audio, voices, specifically content, that we think will serve certain groups better than others. It's really dangerous. It's really tricky. Again, we're making many assumptions about who those people are who are speaking. We have no visual cues, and essentially what they're talking about and how they're serving different communities. So representation matters, first and foremost. We need people of difference, people with diverse profiles, building our products to serve our listeners, first and foremost. Second to that, we're also wanting to connect artists with their fans as well. And there is no one typical archetype of a fan. A fan is a fan. Doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, what you listen to. A fan is a fan. You have your own personal listening habits. You have your own style, your own music tastes, and your own flavour. And we want to make sure that our artists are connecting with those fans. And the data within that is very important too. We also want to understand how our products perform globally. And we know that that's not the way. There's not one size fits all when it comes to listening habits or how our products perform. For example, I'll use this typical example of Discover Weekly, which is your personalised listening habits. What we found in India is that it wasn't applying as well because there are so many different languages within the Indian culture. And so there was a lot of mismatch. We just assumed Indian music was Indian music, which is not the case. There are lots of different dialects, lots of different cultures even within a country. So these listening habits play out very differently even within a culture. So beyond that, representation matters to build our products, but it matters even more deeply when you create cultures around the teams that are making these decisions. There's no point in having a bunch of women on a particular project who never get heard, who never get valued, who never get, seen, essentially. And it also matters that these women have a very varied set of backgrounds and experiences in addition. So what we're doing is not just creating, obviously, more opportunities and roles for women, but once they do land at Spotify, that they have impact. They're seen and heard, they feel like they can belong and they can contribute to this mission. So with that, I'll wrap up and just say that that's sort of what we're working on at Spotify, and we are by no means done. There's a long journey ahead of us, and conversations like this are very empowering, for me at least, sort of driving that strategy forward. So I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So maybe Jean-Laurent, you want to react because when we prepare, you gave the example at Orange, of course, in the movie industry. Of course, we naturally want to drive young girls to Barbie movies because, of course, the business is here, and boys to Dragon Balls, so that parents will more evidently buy. But with our conscience of gender balance inequalities, we don't want that. So how do you balance all that?
I hope there is nobody from Orange in the room. So that's what I was explaining a few moments before. But we don't do that at Orange. So for TV, for instance, we could want to add a feature based on gender. But this is not the case for personalization of TV, but this can be the case for personalization of some advertising campaign. So maybe for the next GEM forum, we could invite advertising director to know what they plan. But what we can decide, as I said, we can decide to perpetuate the stereotypes, or we can, like you said, boys want to watch Dragon Ball and girls want to watch Barbie, or we can decide to terminate these stereotypes. I mean, terminate for the part of artificial intelligence. That does not mean that the problem is solved, because artificial intelligence is the reflect of the stereotypes of the society. So if the society is not ready, that means if people try to still want to watch, if boys still want to watch Dragon Ball, it's not because you terminate the field. It's not because you remove the field from the data that it is finished. What we can ask, what we can debate is it because the society is like that the artificial intelligence is like that? Or is it because the artificial intelligence detects that the society is like that the stereotypes continue? I don't know.
Okay, Ivana, I feel you want
No,
to you have...
I completely agree with that. This is why we need to be careful and understand the structural causes of it and not just focus on the... Obviously, I mean, I have a 3-year-old daughter and sometimes she watches Peppa Pig. Do you know what Peppa Pig is? It's dreadful. No, I have to say that. I have to say, please tweet it because I'm really, really angry. Do you know what happens in Peppa Pig? At some point, the mother, the pig mother, is working on the computer. Yeah. The computer breaks down and she says, "Daddy, can you fix it?" What do you mean, Daddy, can you fix it? So of course, YouTube, that, you know, where I watch that sometime with my daughter, YouTube is terrible. You know, you are never an extremist enough for YouTube. YouTube constantly feeds you something that is worse than what you've just watched. So, you know, it's so obviously there is a problem, the algorithm there. But we have to be careful, and it's really, really important that we do not only focus on the algorithm, forgetting the wider picture. So we should say, stop producing stuff like Peppa Pig and other things. That is where we should be talking about. This is what we should be talking about, and be vocal about it, because, you know, otherwise we'll never get out of the situation. But ultimately, algorithms, they are artifacts and they're created by us. So they're only going to replicate what we do. The problem with AI is that it takes a bias, turns into a stereotype, and the stereotype, if unchallenged, become prejudice. So that's the risk. It's because of the scale of artificial intelligence. But the thing is, we really need to look at the structural issues. I feel that if we start only looking at the algorithms, which is of course problematic, but we forget why the algorithms are like that, then, as you say, I agree 100%, then we're never going to sort out the problem.
So as we are leading it, and we are the persons, human beings, who say to algorithm what to do or not to do, the culture we have, of course, has a strong impact. So, Isa, at Spotify, your company is known for being one of the most diverse companies with a very inclusive culture. Could you share your secret about it?
Sure, I don't know if it's a secret sauce or anything like that, but I definitely feel that when I started 3.5 years ago, and I'm going to be very transparent here, we were 18% women. That's really small. And we just hit 40% last week. So with concerted, focused effort, you get there. And with everyone from top to bottom, in and out, focusing on it, you can affect change. I want to say that sort of off the bat. It took grassroots efforts to get us there. So we established employee resource groups. I'm not too sure if that translates here, but they're essentially business units that are centered around particular demographic groups. We have driven home unconscious bias training, and I want to also call out that training is only building awareness. It doesn't actually change behaviour. And on the behaviour side, we're looking at systems thinking design to unravel and unpack sort of the root causes of bias and applying that to our processes and to our business. And I think it's really about what we're trying to do, and what our CEO is trying to do is we're trying to impact culture. We're trying to reflect culture globally. So we can't do that when we're in a vacuum, in a box with a certain set of people who all look the same. It's just not possible. So with those sorts of mechanisms and levers in place, we feel like the culture is really shaped by our employees and shaped by that business objective. I mean, the list goes on. There's the reason why we even started talking about algorithmic bias 3 years ago is that we had an inclusion summit in London, and Joy Bulamwini came and spoke to us. She's a doctor at the MIT Research Lab who actually brought to our attention the blatant discrimination around putting your hand under a soap dispenser and the colour of her skin was not recognised, so no soap would come out. And that is just a basic function. So it's those types of things that have inspired our team members to go about doing the right thing and serving everyone as best we can.
Thank you. Well, interesting culture. You can change culture. Bénédicte, we're going to talk culture also with you. You spent 27 years of your career at SNCF, the French rail, where you had different jobs, HR director of SNCF Réseau, managing director of Transilien, head of the controllers, so high-level responsibilities at SNCF. And you changed your life. You are now a partner at School Lab, an innovation studio through design thinking for startups. You also have a strong social role as a president of the Institut des Métiers of Orange. And you are also as founder of DigiLab Social, and you are professor at Sciences Po. As a hobby also, interesting, and I encourage you to watch it. You post every week on the social networks a watercolor that you paint yourself with a small text on a day life in the world of millennials. I'll really look at it, click on it so that the algorithm knows that you like it and gives you more every week.
Thank you for the advertising.
Yes, it's really, it's peaceful, it's very nice. Well, you are a kind of go-between between the two management cultures, the old vertical cultures and the new horizontal one, which is predicted to be solving every problems. This is another subject. You built really the major part of your professional career in what could be presented as a traditional word, and you are really now deeply involved in the new world. You navigate in digital lab innovation atmosphere, which means that you meet many young teams who build startups, who build the world of tomorrow. So tell us, how is it from inside? What are the secrets of these new management styles which younger startuppers use?
Okay, thank you to give me the opportunity to share my experience. As you said, I worked almost 30 years in SNCF, a sort of vertical, state-owned company. Few women, 20%. Technical skills needed, but still the gender equality was a concern. And we had people in leader positions very committed to it. And in every single meeting, we talked about it. I don't think we had a lot of really major innovation, but it was still something people were aware of it, okay? And in this new world, actually, what I discovered is it is very fancy. You know, it's It's really fancy. So you work with young, disruptive people. They want to move forward. They are focused on business. You live in a really challenging atmosphere. And these people, they are here because they say they want to change the world. And they are so passionate. And so they have so much energy that you can trust them. They will do it. But unfortunately, this generation is no better than the other when it comes to sexist behaviors or to gender-based biases. In this culture, there is a fake it until you make it attitude, which is a boys' band attitude, you say? Boys are very pleased with this kind of arrogant behavior, just considering they will have success saying it. And as there is no clear lines between the office time and the off time, they will work together, they have fun together, they drink beers together, they might drink too much together, and at the end of the day, the culture is in the company is a WhatsApp feed with some photos you're ashamed of, or sexist jokes you're not really fond of, and it's difficult to have them understand that it's really worrying for everybody, because they don't see the difference between what they do in their private life and what they do in the office life. And giving them boundaries between the two of them is very difficult. So, and we decided we would fix it. But we struggled with it. And another example is if you look at the flowchart of the organization, unfortunately, you see boys in business development positions, you see boys in central role positions, and girls in support roles. And it's really disappointing. I want to share with you an experience I had after we raised our funds. We had to organize the board, and we have 3 male co-founders, and the board had to be organized with 6 people. Okay, so 3 male co-founders, 6 people, and at the end of the day, no one worried about the fact it would we came up with 6 male members at the board, because there was one selected by the employees, male people. We had one coming from the bank, male people. And we had one coming from the private fund, male people. So I had to really speak up to make them understand how unequal it was going to be. And the reason why they changed is because I said, it is going to be a business issue. Having 6 members on the board and 6 people coming from male founders, it is going to be really a business issue. And I can tell you I had no expectation to be on the board, actually. But I didn't expect that in this type of new atmosphere, new company, I would have had to fix these types of problems. And so what I want to tell you is really pay attention to that. Because it's not because it's the new generation that is going to have power in companies that things are going to be fixed. It's the other right. They are not aware of it. And they might consider that gender concerns are sort of activist or lady concerns. Huh? And sometimes I had to convince the young girls to come with me And what I did is we decided to have a group, and as our job is to organize design thinking workshop, we decided to have a design thinking observance of everybody, and we interviewed every single person on the company to ask if they had, for instance, had been experienced discrimination or sexist jokes or uncomfortable experiences or difficulties to say what job they would like to have. And we discovered that all of the girls, all of the women said they had problems of mansplaining in front of customers. So that when they came to customer clients, the boys would speak above them. Okay, I would say above, louder. Which is you can't name and shame in front of the customer. So they would come back and never say it. And what we discovered is that we had problems to recruit, and girls would not stay in the company. And so really we decided we would fix it. But I was thinking it would be very easier. Actually, I discovered it was very more difficult than in SNCF. So I really wanted to share it with you, because no one knows that in this new generation, this can be an issue, and a bigger issue than in the previous one.
Well, thank you for this testimony, because really we didn't think that it would be so difficult to have automaticity and to fight even against what we thought were really old habits of being in a kind of boys' club. Maybe to Jean-Laurent, as a manager facing scarcity of women in AI teams, what are the drawbacks of having so few women? And also from your experience, so you told us that you raised the number of women from 1 to 4. So what did it change so that we can have examples, positive examples to impulse the movement?
I don't know really what makes things change, but things are changing.
Yeah.
Things are evolving in the good way. So, as you said, I discovered that many more women are interested in AI careers, and that means that we managed to do good recruitment forum to sensitize women on AI jobs. That means also that schools are making effort to attract talented women. So that's a good thing. So we should continue. We should also continue this work on creating corporate culture. We should continue to talk about the problem, talk about stereotypes, talk about sexism. We should make people aware of gender diversity issues. We should make developers aware of gender equality issues. And we should make men aware of these problems. I don't see many men in the assistance, so I will try to say some words about it. Men should support these causes. Men should read. Men should listen. Men should unlearn some inappropriate behaviors, and I'm the first to understand that. And there was a good presentation in the previous session about that. They should also talk to other men about sexist words, sexist behaviors, and more importantly, I would say that they should not wait for being congratulated for that, because.
Thank you.
Well, actually.
Please don't congratulate me.
Each other like, just congratulate.
Congratulations, indeed. But what I didn't say is that I didn't tell you the end of the story. Actually, the board is actually 9 people, 6 guys and 3 women, because they decided they would change the rules. And that was very interesting, that they realized they had the solution. It was easy. It was not a problem of having 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 people. It was just changing the rules, and they were in a position to change the rules. So, but if we hadn't showed them, they would not have done it, not for bad reasons, just for not being aware of it.
So this is the issue with stereotypes, which is really change the rules and change the mindset.
And in just a word, because it reminds me of what you said about power, and men should also accept to lose some privileges. That's another point about power to go in your sense.
Well, thank you for this overview. We talked about techniques, about consumers, about culture, about power. Maybe the audience wants to react, comment, ask questions. Maybe, maybe not. Okay.
Well, yes, Sarah Rossetti from Orange. Well, I think for those who are parents, they can have a great role, I think, in changing the society and bringing more awareness to children on this gender equality matters. So I think, of course, the parents have to be aware themselves. And then, as you said, the awareness is not enough because it doesn't change your behavior, or training is not enough. And you have to implement that in your, which is not easy because there are so many stereotypes. So, but definitely parents can change things, but it requires some efforts to do it on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for this testimony, and we can do it. But the problem is that AI is today, and if we wait for the little girls and little boys of today of being without gender stereotypes, in 30 years, everything will be engraved.
Hello, I'm Giorgia, working for Renault. And of course, here we are mostly women. And I would like to know if you have some suggestions to include our colleagues, men colleagues, in this kind of, how to say, job that we have to do together for the future, finally, and also for the company performance. Why not?
Maybe, Isa, you can give your testimony.
I think something that we've seen at Spotify, and it's just the beginning, we're labeling everyone and we're putting everyone into these categories. 2 mechanisms that I've seen actually now start to pique the interest of our white male cisgender counterparts is really talking about allyship, and then also around this systems design thinking. So when you look at allyship, everyone can be an ally. Everyone can be an ally to all, or they can be an ally to many, or an ally to one. And there is a huge opportunity there that it's not just about, bringing someone along on the journey, or about, male versus female. It's about really like helping a whole group of people move ahead, right, through the power of what your privilege and your power. On the flip side, when we try to unravel and dismantle some of the issues that are creating this separation to begin with, when you look at systems design thinking, it's really a great sort of scientific way, almost mathematical way of uncovering what those root causes are for the greater good of all, not just the greater good of gender, even though gender is obviously one of the biggest, more glaring and obvious conditions that we're seeing. So I think if what we've seen is like by training people on how to be better allies and understanding the systems thinking and the design behind why these differences occur in the first place, you start to get a whole broader engaged audience and a much more leaned in, for want of a better word, group of people wanting to make change. And then it doesn't become about gender specifically, it's about the actions that you can take, for a greater good. If anyone wants to add.
some other question? Yes?
Well, I just wanted to add on the education problem. I have 4 children, 3 boys, 1 girl. I started with a girl. I started educating her as a boy because I thought that gender was not the issue. But at the end of the day, she preferred dolls and they preferred car, and I couldn't help it. And I tried. So I think this is not the problem of gender. The problem is equality. And I don't care if you're a man, a woman, or whatever. The thing is to consider the guy, the woman, as a person who has equal rights, whatever gender or you consider it. And I think that what an artificial intelligence can do in this field is creating the between as a neutral thing and not genderized.
Interesting. Yes. When you announce to the teams, well, we have to do a neutral artificial intelligence, how do they react?
No such thing. Neutral is that.
Neutral in terms of not enhancing stereotypes, or how do you give directions to the teams?
I don't know if I can announce that, because it's like the society is not so easy to change things by myself or by one person. It's like we can say, we can use Alexa for instance. We can say to Alexa, "Hey Alexa, make me a world that is neutral or without gender." Okay, artificial intelligence can do that. In fact, you can say, "I will." It's like quotas. In fact, you can say, "Right now, I will have so many CVs."
50%
50% CV in for women and 50% CV for men. But is it really the right solution? I'm not fan of quotas. I'm not fan of forcing the society, but making it evolve. Talk about it, as I said, trying to make the mentalities change. I don't know if I'm right, but that's.
Well, we've tried.
Ivana, you wanted to react also on the
No,
neutral thing.
It's hard to say what's neutral, is it? Because the world is what it's. So if you use AI and you use data that is outside, the data that is naturally what it is. So it will just reflect society unless you intervene on the actual data set and all the processes. So the neutrality data is never neutral. Even the choice of one data set over another is not neutral. I mean, there is this idea of integrity of data is a lie, to be honest, and sadly we've all believed in it, and the problem is what we've got now. So it's just one thing I wanted to say around the education and things like that. Of course, children segregate themselves. They do, because since they're very little, that's what they're used to. When they go to nursery, things start at such an early stage in life. You know, it's so easy. The way that even a teacher, I mean, even the fact that most of primary school or nursery school teachers are female, that immediately sends a clear message to the girls. So obviously it's something that we really need to work on, and it's going to take time. But immediately there are things that we can do immediately, which is call out stereotypes when we see it. That's very important. Call it out. Find always male allies. Do you know what I do? I'll tell you a secret. Do you know what I do? I made up completely that a man has told me something. So sometimes I go to my boss or I go to organization and say, this guy, without naming them, this guy said this. And immediately you can see that they're interested. You know, just for me, so I made up a male advisory board. I just create it as a way to break in the conversation sometimes. Not with my company is actually so very modern and diverse, but sometimes it happens. I just make it up. I just say, oh, do you know, Tom said this. Was Tom? Oh, that guy there. And then as a way to break in. But in reality, what I do is I have 3 people in my life that are really, really important to me. And two are female and one is a man. And I always trust him. And if I always run things past him, and I always say, and if he says that something should be called out, I go and call it out. But it's really important to have those male allies, people that can really support you with that particular situation, and count on them, because that is crucial. And and really, I mean, there's one big thing about being here today is that, together we can really call out things. If you go walk into a room and there is 4 men talking on a panel, tweet it out, say it. That's not good enough. And ask a male next to you to tweet it out as well. And if you say something that is not right in the street, say it. Social media, if they go one really positive thing, is that they can really broadcast out these kind of things. And also tag people in, especially people that have got public roles. So they have to respond. So we have this power in our hands. Use it. Let's really use it. And it's a fantastic way to get the message out.
Talk about it. Instead of
As a question, reaction? Yes.
Hi, I've got a question, yes. It's quite a concrete question. So, Isa, you've talked about quotas, and you've proved us that quotas improve the proportion of women in the business. But in the past, in my little past, because I'm quite young, I've met quite a few women who explained to me that they were against quotas. And I'm literally left with no response, because I am for quotas, and I really believe in their power, but I have no argument. So do you have concrete and valid argument against this?
I would actually say that we never had a quota to begin with. We just worked on changing the environment, focused on ensuring our teams were representative, and that we, strove for what was the world, basically. And that is, depending on which part of the world you look, is around 50-50, give or take a sort of less than 1% for other genders. But that was essentially what we're striving for, and we're still striving for that. But we never sort of set concrete quotas in place, because that didn't translate into the experiences that women were having once they showed up. We needed to change the whole system, not just the representation. And then by virtue of changing the whole system, we started to draw more women into these roles, more women wanting to be a part of Spotify. And then it just perpetuated. It just rolled from there.
And if the word quota is a problem, use objective.
Yeah.
A figure, objective.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change anything on the philosophy of the issue. And if you need, we know a lot of women who say, I am proud to be or to have been a quota woman. So don't worry about the subject. Don't worry. I think we have another question over there.
Yes. Hi, I have a question, and let me just preface it by saying I'm not a technical person. And I fully agree with the whole we have to work on the structure of the issues. I'm also wondering what's going on an AI basis against the gender equity issues within AI. Are people working on codes or programs or algorithms, I don't know what we would call them, that can go into systems and detect where there are issues and then repair them?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's good news.
Yes, but
Kind of
yes.
like virus control.
It is possible, and what we want to share is that it is possible, so every company should use it. Should use this possibility.
Well, I'd love to learn more about that sometime.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it's possible, of course, but we should not do that. Maybe the contrary or something completely different that should break the whole system. In fact, so be careful by changing the data. I prefer to say enriching the data. Having a data of good quality instead of poor quality, having a data up to date, this is better than making the revolution, I would say.
I had a question for all of you. You are dealing with those of you who are dealing with artificial intelligence. Do you think when you discuss with other companies, are they aware of the danger that artificial intelligence represent for gender inequalities, for gender bias?
Not all of them.
Not all of them. Okay.
I mean, I work with loads, and I have to say, yes. But whether it's because they're worried about reputational backlash, so whether it's about the fact that they feel that ethics has become a big word, so the big companies, they want to be at the forefront of that. So, for example, recently, Google set up their ethics board, which didn't go really well. So a lot of companies, they are seeing this more and more as a business imperative. But I have to share something that really makes me laugh. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning, and it basically says that American investors, they're worried about the reputational damage of ethics of the companies they invest in. And they are saying to these companies, if you want us to invest, you need to inject some ethics. Inject some ethics.
But that's not even a...
But, you know, it's not something that you inject. It's
you live it. You live it.
You live it. And also, I mean, ethics is one thing, in my view, is a trade-off. It's all about trade-offs. So what is the trade-off between the data that you give and what you receive? What is the trade-off between an algorithm being able to be explainable and the efficiency of it? So it's all about trade-off. And women need to be in the places where the decisions about trade-off are made. That's the key thing. Remember this, it's one thing I want you to remember, is about trade-offs and being in those places where the trade-off is decided. Mm-hmm. And companies, I have to say, they have started to invest in it. So I don't really care why they do it. Like, if they do it because they don't want a reputational damage, I just go with it. So just go with it and say to organization, to your bosses, say, look, if we don't do it, then, you know, the reputational damage would be incredible. And there is no longevity in the market, you know. But it is true, though. It is true. So things are changing.
So we have to make a trade-off because we have only 2-3 minutes left. Even if we began 10 minutes later, do we have 5 minutes to make the conclusions as a trade-off? 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. So I won 3 minutes. So maybe, yes, a word of conclusion, a recommendation you would like to share with the audience. Who wants to begin?
I can say some maybe optimistic words. In fact, if we take into account these ethical questions, if we try to talk about it like we said today, if we try to discuss the good things, if we try to address the diversity issues, I think I'm more optimistic that the artificial intelligence is better for us than having a rule-based personalization or rule-based intelligence like we had 5 years ago. Because a rule-based is based on some person who will decide that, how the products are built, how the personalization, the preferences are produced. And if we take into account the ethical issues, the artificial intelligence will be the reflect of our society. So this, to me, it is better than having a role-based intelligence.
Thank you. Lisa?
I'll just build on that a little bit, and with the trade-off piece, just before I move into the last comments, there is a trade-off with diversity too. It takes time, and some companies are just not prepared to take the time to invest in finding the talent that isn't right in front of them, or it's not as easily accessible, or may not be found in the straightforward linear way that it's always been found. So the trade-off exists in hiring for these roles as well, and we have to be able to reconcile that in our minds, that with that time comes a long-term strategy and a long-term enrichment of these roles and the algorithms that we're designing. We have these sort of 3 principles that we then encourage people to think about at Spotify when we're talking about this work, diversity and belonging work, but how it applies in the AI space is really around challenging and asking the right questions. I think that is the sort of starting point. You have to be curious, you have to have the courage to speak up, and you have to have the compassion to understand where different people and different perspectives are coming from. And those 3 C's are really like the driving force around how diversity shows up within our company anyway, and how you can be a better ally and how you can uncover the system's flaws that are perpetuating these stereotypes. So that's it.
Thank you. Bénédicte, you want to share a few words?
Well, I think the way to tackle the issue is considering it's a business issue. And there is a reason of hope is the young girls I work with. They have new, innovative ways of speaking it up and loud. And actually this famous fake it until you make it can be used for equality as well.
Yes. Try it. Try equality.
I want to close as well on a note of optimism, because this technology that we're developing now, they are extremely fascinating, and the potential is huge. They hold incredible promises for the future. And one thing I would say is that let's have a say together on what we want these technologies to be useful. We've got amazing things like the UN Millennium Goals, reducing poverty, stopping climate change. This is what we should be using this technology for.
Well, thank you. We are at a very exciting turning point. And for you, the audience, now that you are aware, you really can help us build a better and more gender-balanced society. Thank you for your attention. We can thank and applaud again the speakers for their active participation. Yes, thank you.